I've been in your position before. I know that it's, it would be nice to just not have it on, and you could look like you were here and go eat lunch or something, but I would prefer that you have it on if you don't mind. There we go. I see some faces now. All right. Yeah, we don't care if you guys eat. Nobody's watching you that close, except for me, unless you start talking, and then you might show up. So today what we're going to do, we're going to talk about the chapter 6. We covered chapter 5 last time in the test, and just to give you guys a little bit of a heads up, this is something that you'll be surprised by, yet at the same time you should actually be kind of thankful for. It was already pre-loaded in here from another time when I had a strictly online course for this. We're about to take another exam shortly. A lot of what is going to be, I'm calling it your midterm exam. Most of it will be the same information that was covered on test 1. So there's not really a lot of need to go back through that. You guys do need to pay some attention to today, though, because the therapeutic recreation process is what we're going to talk about today. Chapter 6, it is the backbone of the way the whole process works. So you need to pay attention. You need to take some notes, listen to what I'm saying about things that are going to be on the test, because you'll get a notification here relatively soon about another test. And I know that's surprising to you, but this next one is going to be, in a lot of ways, kind of a freebie for you. It's going to be a 150-point test, and probably 85 to 90 of those points are going to be almost freebies, because it's things that we've just covered, we've gone over and reviewed. You should do well on this. So if nothing else, if you didn't do as well as you wanted to on the first test, you can bump yourself up. If you did do well on the first test, you can solidify yourself even more so by doing well on this one, and just consider it a freebie. It's not going to take you an incredibly long time. It's a little longer than the first test, but not by a bunch. Again, on these tests, when they come through, don't forget not to leave anything blank. I can't give you any credit if you leave it blank, so don't do that. And also remember that you've got your materials at your disposal. If you've gotten the book and you've got the PowerPoints, and you've been coming to class, you should do well on these tests. And that's what I want you guys to do. I'm not here to try to make you fail. I want to see you guys do well. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to share my screen, because this is an important chapter that I want you guys to really get when it's said and done. Y'all have the PowerPoint now? Okay, good deal. Yes. Thank you. All right. So we're going to get right into it. So there's 4 parts of the therapeutic recreation process. They are assessment, planning, implementation, and evaluation. And you guys, as you continue coming through my courses, there's going to be a recurring theme there. And the good thing about this 4 parts of the therapeutic recreation process, it also applies to things not just therapeutic recreation. Most anything where you have to make a decision, where you're trying to help someone get better, you have to go through this same process: assessment, planning, implementation, evaluation. So it's something that you can apply to everyday life, not just recreation therapy, but we'll talk about it in the recreation therapy world primarily. So the first part, it's assessment. We all kind of know what assessment is. You think of assessment and you think of things like taking a test. That's an assessment. Assessment is basically just an information gathering process we know that what's the purpose of assessment in recreation therapy? What are we trying to find out by doing assessment?
See what your patients can handle.
Yeah, to see what they can handle or to see what they need, to see where their deficits are, the things that you need to work with, whether it's an injury, whether they have, low self-esteem, whatever the case may be. Our assessment is to find out where their needs are. We also, through assessment, we find out things such as what do they like to do as far as recreation? What are the things that they enjoy doing and during their leisure time? And that way you have found out what they have going on and what we need to work on. And you found out what they enjoy doing, so you can try to use those things to address the issues that they have. Okay, so it's not just finding out what is, quote, wrong with a person, it's finding out what they like as well. So it's a two-pronged approach there. There's a bunch of different methods you can use for assessments. There's when you get patients at certain facilities, you may get existing documents that come in with them. They kind of have a file. You can look at that and find out some information about the patient. Observation strictly is just by watching them in a group, watching how they walk. If you see someone is walking with an obvious limp, then that gives you, that's an assessment you can make with ease right there, without being something that you have to set up for, to do. There's interviewing where you actually sit, you talk to your patient, you try to build that rapport with them where they feel comfortable with you, where when you try to motivate them into participating with you, they're going to be interested in doing that, because that's the first chance you have to kind of set the tone of, hey, I'm here to help you. That's kind of where during the assessment phase, if you do an interview with your patient to see what they like, what they need, hey, I want you to help plan what we're going to do, things like that. It's going to make them buy into what you're doing all that much more. There's also some standardized assessments, some different tests that can be done as far as assessment purposes. Interest inventories, they're another thing that are sometimes used, where it may be just something where they're making check marks by what recreation activities do you enjoy participating in, and you may learn that somebody doesn't like heights or that they cannot swim through something like that, these interest inventories. There's also information you can get from other treatment team assessments. When you're working in an interdisciplinary team, you're going to have other people that work with your patients as well, like say nutrition. So if you look at nutrition and it says, okay, Tom is on he came in the morbidly obese range. He's going to be on a 1,500 calorie meal plan. He is allergic to nuts. Those are things that you need to know as far as your programming to a degree, so you can find out information by assessments that other people on your team have done. So that's the first part, that's assessment. The purpose of it right here, you can gather client information. Number one, you're finding out all about your client. You can determine your overall program effectiveness. So you're assessing yourself and what you're doing as well. Communicate with other professionals. Meet requirements for assessment by administrators and external agencies. So your own facility will expect you to be doing assessments where you can provide individualized programming. CMS, CARF, and JCAHO, those are all. CMS is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. CARF is the Commission on Accreditation of Rehabilitation Facilities. JCAHO Joint Commission on Accreditation of Health Care Organizations. That's what those are. They are the watchdogs I've talked about before that come in and make sure that you're doing things the right way in your facilities. They help you to stay accredited, and you know, they check things all the way down to water temperature. Is it too hot? Are the food temperatures proper? When your patients get medications, are they getting them in the right way? How do you keep up with what's being done? Are they receiving active treatment, which is actively participating with your clients during the time you have with them, not just letting them sit and you not doing your job. Things like that are the type things that they come in and look for, as well as safety issues and things like that. So again, assessment methods that are used: review existing documents, standardize assessments. We've said all these. Interviewing, I think that one is very important. And it sounds very formal. It doesn't need to be that formal. The best way is just talking with your patients and saying, hey, you know, introduce yourself. I'm going to be working with you. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you like to do? You know, you find out so much, and you build that relationship where you can work with them better. And then observation is another way, as we said. On your, as far as existing documents we talked about, when patients come in, they do an intake assessment generally, and those are things that you need to look at up front. And by doing that, you're cut down on asking them unnecessary questions. You know, you may actually have patients say, well, I just told that lady in there this. Why are you asking me to? You know, things like that. If you look over some of this stuff up front, you will know it. You're cutting down on repetition, and it's useful in preparing for other types of assessments. So as far as standardized assessments and interest inventories, we talked about those a little bit about that already. There's some therapeutic recreation specific assessments that can be done. Leisure diagnostics battery, a leisure competence measure, a comprehensive evaluation for therapeutic recreation, or CERT. A little bit about these. Your leisure diagnostics battery, that one kind of tells how they feel as far as perceived freedom in their leisure. Are they able to do what they want to do during their leisure time? What are their barriers to leisure? Those are the kind of things that you learn about by using that particular assessment. The leisure competence measure measures 8 domains: leisure awareness, leisure attitudes, leisure skills, community integration skills, community participation, their cultural and social behaviors, interpersonal skills, and social contacts. So you're looking at all those different phases of their life that all play into things that we can address through therapeutic recreation. The CERT, C-E-R-T, it looks at things like gross muscular function, fine movements, locomotion or the ability to walk, motor skills, sensory issues, cognitive issues, communications, and behaviors. So it's more diagnostic in terms of what you're assessing than the other two are. The other two are more about what do you like to do, what can you do as far as leisure, things like that. CERT tells you diagnostically where they fit so you can plan accordingly. You could look up each one separately and learn a lot about them. The some general assessment systems that are listed here. These basically talk about self-care, whether they can walk, how can they communicate? Are they effective communicators? Are they social? Are they, how good is their cognition? Are they normal IQ? Are they below normal IQ? Things like that. Those are the things that you find out in these lower, in the general assessment systems here. I'm not going to ask you much about those, but you do need to know about these top 3: leisure diagnostic battery, leisure competence measure, and comprehensive evaluation for therapeutic recreation. Know what those three are about and what they do. They are all in your textbook as well. So in interviewing, you figure out what your focus of the interview is going to be. It basically helps you to gauge the client's interests, which helps you identify your therapy goals. That's a big thing about this. Preparation, when you are preparing to do an interview, like I said, it helps if you look at some of their paperwork up front before you actually interview or just sit and talk with them. So do that up front. Look at the paperwork that you have available to you. Make sure that you set up the time and an appropriate space to do that where they actually feel like they're getting your attention. And at the end, as you're progressing through the quote interview, I kind of hate to call it an interview because to me, you're just meeting your patient to find out what they need from you, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, how you can help them. So, it's not really an interview. And by the end of it, you need to be kind of bringing it back around and making it casual before the end, so they don't feel like they've just been drilled for however long with questions. You want to feel like you just made a friend at the end of it. That's how you want them to feel. That's how you're going to get the best reactions through the whole process, is if you can do that. By observing behavior during the interview, you can learn a lot about someone right there. How much eye contact are you getting from them? What sort of posture do they have? Are they interested in what you're talking about? I mean, you can tell whether someone is interested or disinterested. Why do you think I wanted you guys to put on your cameras today? Pretty clear who's interested and disinterested. No, not really. I can't see very many of you at once anyway. Tone of voice, you may notice that your patient is asking you to repeat yourself over and over. And that may be a situation where they have trouble with hearing. It may be the way you talk. They may just be trying to test you and make you mad. It depends on who you're working with and things like that. But this initial meeting / interview is pretty important. As far as observation is different in that it documents actual behaviors that you can see. It's more useful. This is still during the assessment process now. We haven't even gotten past that. But you're documenting actual behavior. It's useful for clients that are non-cooperative, that don't want to talk to you. I've seen this especially in like drug and alcohol rehabilitation settings. You've got people that don't want to be there. They've been mandated to go to rehab or something. They don't want to talk to you. They don't want to work with you. And that's another reason why it's important to build that rapport with them up front through your quote interview. Like I say, I don't like to call it that, but through your initial talks with them, try to build a little bit of a relationship. But a lot of times you have clients that are just uncooperative, and you still have to write progress notes and things like that. So by doing that, you just have to observe them, and you see that they won't talk to you, but they're talkative with the other patients. That's something you would make note of. You would make note that they wouldn't discuss family. That certain things are like triggers for them. Also, you can, like I said, if you see someone with an obvious limp, you're going to pick up on the fact that they've got an issue with their right foot. At that point, if you haven't already seen it in the paperwork, then you can go back and look, try to find out what's going on with their foot, or ask them a specific directional question like, hey, I noticed you're limping. Are you hurt? Or, whatever, something like that. And you can find out some information. But, the thing about observation, it doesn't measure things like moods or beliefs, attitudes, intentions. Only things that you can mark, yes or no, they did this. You could put a check mark by it. Did they blink their eyes? Yes. Did they blink their eyes again? Yes. You could check in an hour how many times somebody blinked their eyes. Now, you wouldn't want to do that. Obviously, that would be a ridiculous task. But I'm just saying that is an observation and something that you can take. There's no question about it. They either do it or they don't. If you start trying to make trying to assume, you're making assumptions about someone's mood or beliefs or attitudes when you really don't know your patients, you're just getting to learn them, then that's something that you cannot do during observation. You can't tell how somebody's thinking, feeling only by, you can say they were talking in a loud tone, but you don't need to say they were mad, because you may not know that they were mad. They may just talk that way. Okay, next step. Let's go to planning. During the planning phase, you put together a summary of the results from the assessment, and it becomes your client's individualized program plan. Very important, because this is not a cookie cutter situation where everybody gets the same treatment. They all have different needs. They all have different things that you'll be addressing and dealing with. So individualized is the key. It's hugely important portion of the recreation therapy process. You list their strengths in the IPP. You need to know that IPP stands for Individualized Program Plan also, as far as testing going forward. You list their strengths, you list their limitations, and then from there, what you're looking for is, okay, what do we need to work on? From that point, you're going to set goals and objectives, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move a little bit farther along. You want to establish a match between the client's goals and specific program goals. Is something you want to do during this planning phase. It gives you an idea of what sort of programs and what sort of activities you want to place your clients in. So as far as goal development, this is important. This is a big thing with recreation therapy right here. Goals are general accomplishments that the client should achieve through participation in therapeutic recreation. Goals are the big picture. They're not the small picture. Goals are, my client, a good example of a goal would be Jennifer will improve her cardiovascular health during the next 3 months. Very broad. It doesn't say how you're going to do it, but it says the end result. You're working on cardiovascular health or endurance. Okay. So clearly you've seen during the assessment phase that that's where we need to work on. We need to work on weight loss or something, and we need to work on cardiovascular health. So that will be something you could use for a goal. Now, objectives are like little stair steps that help you get to a goal. Okay. They're measurable criteria for determining when a goal has been met. That's there, and each objective has 3 things: a condition, a behavior, and a criteria. Very, very, very important. This slide, if you don't take anything else with you today, take this slide right here, because goals and objectives are the key to providing actual true therapeutic recreation. Because if you're not doing goals and objectives, you're not doing it. Okay, so let's move on. We go in some of the other courses, we go a lot deeper into goals and objectives and exactly how they need to be written. This course, I just want you to know that goals are the big picture, objectives are the smaller steps, So an objective would be, okay, we already said that the goal will improve cardiovascular health. An objective would be, hang on, let me go back here. Upon arrival to the center, there's your condition. Tom will walk on the treadmill at 4.0 miles per hour for 30 minutes, 3 days a week. Okay? At least 3 days a week would be a good ending for that. That way you've got your 3 conditions. Upon arriving is your condition of the objective. The behavior will walk on the treadmill for 30 minutes, and the criteria at least 3 times per week. And those are things that you can actually check off. Did we do this? Did we do this? Did we do this? At the end of each, for your IPP, it's set up for a specific amount of time. At the end of that time period, you're able to see whether objectives were met and whether these steps that helped you to reach, and you see how walking on the treadmill would lead you to the goal that we talked about of improving cardiovascular health. Objectives are more specific ways that you're going to do that. And there's usually several objectives for each goal. You guys understand the difference on that? You got that part? Because it is important. You need to know goals, the big picture. Objectives are small. You'll have several objectives for each goal. Objectives are very specific. Goals are very broad. We good? Okay. And I'm sorry to keep going over that, but this is very, very, like I say, this is the backbone of therapeutic recreation. And it's the good thing about it is that you can generalize it to other things other than this course, this whole process. It doesn't have to be therapeutic recreation. It's a good way to plan positive changes for people anyway. Some other things to consider during planning. Make sure I don't miss any of my notes here. The main thing that you're doing during planning is determining appropriate activities. That's the number one thing that you're trying to do during the planning phase, and figuring out how you're going to take care of that and get that done. So your activities need to have a direct relationship to the client goals. If they don't, then it's not therapeutic recreation. It's just recreation. If you're not working on the things that you claim that you need to work with for your patient, then you're not really doing recreation therapy. Your activity characteristics can influence successful activity implementation. So what you're doing has a lot to do with how effective it is. So the choices you make for your clients to work on and the choices that you make with your clients are important, and you want them to feel like they're a part of the process. That's why during the interview or the initial meeting, you're talking with them and you're finding out things they like to do. And that's why you're doing that, because you want to use things that they like doing. Therefore, they're going to stick with it and they're going to be more successful with what you're trying to implement. Clients should be able to place the activity in the context of therapeutic recreation goals. They need to know that what they're doing is for a purpose. So if they can see that, then you're going to have better, they're going to stick with it better, for lack of a better way to put it. And the activity should be interesting and engaging. Obviously, that's, if they're enjoyable for the client, they're going to stick with it a lot more. They're going to be more excited about therapeutic recreation. When I was working at the regional center here in town, we were everybody's favorite. They loved to come to rec therapy because we were the fun ones. We were the ones that, even though we were working on things, we tried to make it fun for them. We did some other things that weren't, we were also a recreation department, and we did some trips and things that weren't therapeutic recreation, but we did a lot of things that were working on specific things, and we made it fun. And that's the thing. They always wanted to come to recreation, where they may not have wanted to go to physical therapy and just do exercises. I mean, they may like seeing the people there, but the activities themselves, what we provided, were more enjoyable for them, and thus we were kind of their favorites. Okay, some things that we use for planning in therapeutic recreation: task analysis. Okay, this is an important slide as well, too, for testing purposes. Task analysis is where we break down a skill into its component parts. It would be such as brushing our teeth. You know, think how many ways you can truly break that down, how many steps you can break that skill into. Like if you really write down each step of brushing your teeth. Take toothbrush in left hand, open toothpaste, squeeze toothpaste onto toothbrush, turn on water, place toothbrush under, you know, like everybody brushes their teeth a little different or whatever, but think, well, that's just the first steps and start of it. And then you could talk about all about holding the toothbrush, and what you're doing there, you're analyzing each step and for what you're wanting your patient to be able to do for recreation. And once you analyze all the steps that it takes, you know, you have to be able to grip a toothbrush. You have to be able to open a lid. You have to be able to squeeze. You have to be able to differentiate between hot and cold. Now, this is not a recreational example, but it's an example of how you break down a task into a lot of different parts. And then you ask yourself, is the client able to do each one of these pieces? If so, then you're looking at something that is a good choice. Okay. Then you have activity analysis. It builds on what I just said. It identifies the skills necessary for each sequential step above. So by doing task analysis and activity analysis, you are basically using those two things to figure out whether or not your client is going to be able to do the activity that you want them to do. If they're unable to kick a ball, if that's during your task analysis, you realize that to kick a ball, that they have to stand on one leg while they're kicking with the other leg, and they don't have the balance to stand on one leg, then you probably wouldn't want to do soccer or any activity where they're going to have to stand on one leg and kick. So that's found by breaking down by step the processes of what they're going to be doing. That's a big part of planning. At that point, you put together an activity plan for each session. You're going to outline exactly what's going to happen during your therapeutic recreation program. Activity modification. This is important as well. A lot of times, let's see, has anybody ever seen any videos or just have any ideas about, could someone that has no vision take softball batting practice? What's a way that could happen? What's an activity modification that could allow that to happen?
Maybe hit off a tee. Tell them where the ball is.
That's a modification you could do. A tee, that's a good answer. There's anybody have another idea too? There's two things. That was one of the two that I was thinking of as a modification. What's another? A little more difficult, but it happens.
Where they make the ball beep whenever
Absolutely.
they throw it.
That's it. A beeping ball. Now that doesn't tell you quite as much, but you know, when you lose some of your senses, the others become just stronger and stronger, and you'd be surprised how well some people could actually hit a beeping ball. Now that's an activity modification that would be pretty cool. You know, you're just, as far as activity modification, a good way to put it, you're just adjusting the activity as to the proper level of difficulty for your person. Now, I mean, just like on video games, I know you all have played video games, they have difficulty settings on there. You can kind of set the difficulty settings by doing activity modification. Mostly what we're talking about here, though, is when someone is unable to do the activity without, say someone is elderly and you wanted to play volleyball. What are some things you could modify to where you could have, 5-on-5 volleyball for a group of 70-year-olds? What are some things you could change to modify to make it doable? Would a regular volleyball possibly hurt their wrists? A lot of them may have arthritis and things like that. You think that might be a problem?
Make the net shorter.
Absolutely. I would do that first off. I would go ahead.
You could use balloons and they could sit in their chairs.
Absolutely. You could do it just sitting at a table. You could use balloons. You could use a beach ball. They're bigger. They can be bigger. They're going to move slower. Therefore, you won't have to worry about the reaction time. It won't be as heavy and hard as a regular volleyball, so you're not going to be hurting their hands and wrists. If you actually have them on a volleyball court, I would make the court smaller. Okay, my 4-year-old, he can't shoot a basketball into a 10-foot goal. So I make an activity modification when we go out and shoot ball, and I drop the goal down to a level where that he can shoot it that high. That's the simplest way, the simplest activity modification I can think of. You see a lot of that happening in Special Olympic events, and it stinks that we're not able to have some participation with them, because they're a good opportunity for you guys to see these activity modifications, especially, and social inclusion and things like that in person. So we've gone through, everybody kind of understand task analysis. That's every step, every main step that it would take to do a task. And then activity analysis is breaking down like each one of those into smaller pieces. So you're making sure that your clients can do what you are wanting them to do. Otherwise, if they can't do those, you may have to modify what you're doing to where they can, or you may need to choose a different activity. Once you look at the task and activity analysis, if they can't do it, you may need to change activities. And activity modification is just making it where your client is able to be effective in what you're trying to do. Now, remember back to this last test, we talked about least restrictive environment. And the key to that is, you only want to help your clients as much as you need to. Just because my 4-year-old can't shoot the ball into a 10-foot goal, I don't want to drop the goal down to 4 feet where he can dunk it necessarily. I still want him to work. I still want him to be challenged, and he wants the same thing. So basically what I'm saying is, just like least restrictive environment and that whole premise, we don't want to modify things any more than we have to either. It's kind of demeaning if you make things too simple. Just something to kind of remember on that. All right, let's talk about implementation. So we've gone through A and P. Now we have I and E left. API is assessment, planning, implementation, evaluation, the backbone of therapeutic rec. We've handled 2 of them. Let's get these other 2 knocked out. So we move to implementation. There are technical skills that are used. That's the physical tasks associated with your job responsibilities. What do you have to be able to do? It's usually listed on job applications. You know, applicant must be able to lift 30 pounds, stand for this amount of time, type so-and-so number of words a minute. You know, things like that are the type things we're talking about. Technical skills. They're actual physical tasks that are associated with what you have to do in recreation therapy. Then you have facilitation skills, which is where you're helping people to participate in the activities that you planned during the planning phase. So we're, at this point, we are engaging in the behavior that we want them, or the activities that we want them to work on. So when we're doing that, we have some things here as far as facilitation, and you need to know these for sure. Briefing, leading, and debriefing. Briefing is basically, before you start the activity, you stand in front of them and say, okay, all right, this is what we're about to do. You tell them any rules about the game. You tell them, hey, we're using a beach ball instead of a volleyball. Instead of using the yellow lines on the court as out of bounds, we're going to use the red lines. Okay, let's have fun. Let's do like that. So you give them any rules, guidelines, things like that. Then leading, you're just basically keeping the session moving, making sure that you're targeting specific goals for your clients. You know, you don't want things to get off track. And then you've got debriefing. When would that happen, do you think? By common?
After.
Yep, you got briefing up front, then you lead the activity. At the end, you do debriefing. It's also known sometimes as processing. And what you do, you review the session with your clients. You talk about, you know, this is why we did this. Did you, how did you feel when you were doing this? You can ask them questions about what you did, and you tell them, this is why we did it. Do you feel like you made any progress toward our goal today? You can get some back and forth going, but you tell them a little bit more about why you did it, because you want them to be able to generalize it and appreciate what you did and take it even outside of where you are and work on it themselves sometimes. Some specific debriefing strategies, and this one is excellent here. What, so what, and now what are 3 questions that you can ask in a debriefing session. Take this with you from today too, because it is very useful. I have used it a lot. When you finish your activity, what is just basically you say, okay, all right, so what did we do today? You get somebody to tell you. And then it's so what, so what does it mean? What do we take from it? Why did we do that? You get answers for that. And then you say, now what? So what, after doing that, what did you learn and what can we take moving forward? It is a perfect thing to use many times for debriefing. It's so good that I'm not even worried about the 5 stages of questioning. So I'll skip on ahead. Okay, we've made it to evaluation. We've got client evaluation. You've got program evaluation, different evaluation tools, and evaluation system. So as far as client evaluation, you're looking to see whether or not your client is making progression or whether they're regressing in relation to the goals and objectives that we set. Remember now, goal is the big picture. Objectives are the little steps that we can check off whether or not they met them or not. Program evaluation, you're just ensuring the quality of what you're providing and what you're getting your clients to do. Are your IPPs written well? Are the activities running as smoothly as possible? You're actually, are we getting the most you look at things like cost benefit analysis. You know, we're spending X amount of money to do this activity. Are we getting the results that we want from it? Is it worth that? Things like that are things that you have to look at when you are evaluating the program. There's a lot of different tools that you can look at as far as evaluation. Attendance and participation are the easiest things to evaluate. Was somebody there? Did they participate? Pretty easy to evaluate, but it's not very informative. You know, it's just something that you can keep up with, and you will probably have to do that in a setting whether or not your person was present and whether they participated. Not very hard to keep up with. As far as these evaluation systems, does anybody know what SMART goals are? You know what SMART stands for?
Specific, measurable, attainable, like reachable, I
Yep.
think. And time specific or time
Awesome.
oriented.
Very good. Y'all remember what SMART goals are? That seems testable. I can't remember, but it seems like something that could be very easily put on there. And goal attainment scaling. It provides a consistent mechanism for evaluating effectiveness. That's what the key is for that. It gives you a scale to look at as to whether or not whether you've been effective. And it lets you compare clients even when they have kind of different goals. That's an evaluation system that I've never really used much, but I know that it's there. Okay. Hang on, let me see something real quick. So right here, we've made it through API all the way. So assessment, planning, implementation, evaluation. This is just giving you a little bit of extra information for these things, or some things that we've talked about. There's different levels of planning that you have to do. When we do, during the planning phase, we do assessments, and you have to write an assessment report. You need to be thinking of goals once you get the information that you need up front. What are the big picture things that we can improve with our client? And it can be mental, it can be, when I say mental, it can be emotional, it can be where you're actually working on cognitive skills, it can be physical. You can hit a lot of different facets with recreation therapy. So you figure out where you need to be working with your patient, and that's where you set your big goals. Then you make your smaller objectives. So know again what the difference is between goals and objectives. That will be asked of you. Goals are big, objectives are small. Be able to even give me an example of those would be a good thing. Once you have all your planning, you can place clients in groups with similar clients. If they have the same things that you're working on, that allows you to work with multiple patients at once and work on things that are beneficial to a group rather than just one. We talked about tools for planning and activity plan already. Implementation, again. There's a lot of things that go on in recreation therapy. You know, we're dealing with special populations. We're dealing with people a lot of times who are older, who have memory problems, who may have dementia, people with mental illness, people with developmental disabilities, people who are depressed, people with substance abuse issues. So therapeutic recreation, we are not counselors. Absolutely not. If you wanted to be a counselor, you should go to school to be a counselor. But that's what I'm saying is during the process, there is very much a comparison between a therapeutic recreation specialist and a counselor in a lot of ways. If you make that clicking connection with your patient that you need to be successful, you're going to do some unofficial counseling with them. You're going to help them learn the technical skills that they need to be successful with you. You need to work on your own facilitation skills, which is facilitation. That's how you lead, how you give them activities to do. How do you lead? What's your best way to debrief at the end of your sessions? Process what you're doing. And these are things that get better as you do more of them. Again, we talked about this already here, and we've made it. Let me see which one of these catches my eye before I let you go. Okay, the top question here about the pros and cons regarding each assessment method we talked about. Which is the best one, you think? Interviewing, observation, or standardized assessments? Anybody have a thought on that?
I would say observation, because in like the assessment or interview, people tend to lie about some stuff. When you watch them, like, you can see how they act.
I like that, and you brought up something that I didn't really say. Sometimes people aren't really forthcoming about things. Observation is fact. You saw it. You can mark it down. It did happen. Whereas in interviewing, they may tell you a lie, an untruth. The positive with each one has positives. In interviewing, you get to build that relationship with your patient. I do think that's important. Observation, there's no doubt what you're seeing, it either happened or it didn't, and you're making an assessment on things based on that. Standardized assessments they have scales that you can give this to. Sometimes standardized assessments can be completed by the patients themselves, their family members or representatives, things like that, and they give you information that you can kind of grade on a scale and put people into specific groups based on these, because they have scores that you're supposed to go by. They all have strengths. The relationship between assessment and planning. So in order to discuss that, basically it's just saying, to do your planning, I'll put it this way: to do successful planning, you must have a proper assessment up front to see strengths, to see weaknesses, to see needs. And from that, once you have those things, that's where you find out what you're going to target for an outcome. Those are identified and established through setting goals and objectives, which help the clients to reach those goals. Those are the small pieces. So task analysis, we talked about that. There's appropriate sequences for an activity. I was talking about brushing teeth. Do you take the lid off the toothpaste first, or do you grab your toothbrush first? There's specific orders that things need to happen. So you need to know that there's certain ways that things need to be done, and make sure that your client can understand that and use the appropriate sequencing to do that. Okay, as far as debriefing strategies, I really didn't even touch on the second one. So remember the what, so what, now what? That's a very, very good debriefing. That's what happens at the end. Briefing is up front, followed by what? What's in the middle? Leading. You got briefing, leading, and then debriefing. Leading is where you're actually doing the activity, or they're doing it. You're keeping them on track, making sure that they're going the way that they should be. This is just something for you to think about. What's the difference between assessment and evaluation? Anybody have an answer for that? I know that they're similar. What would somebody say the difference between assessment and evaluation might be?
Assessment would probably be done before you do something, and the evaluation would be afterwards.
That's true a lot of the times. Good answer. Something else that just kind of hits me. Anybody else have any thoughts on this before I talk some more? Because I've talked plenty today.
I feel like assessment is more information gathering, and then evaluation is executing what you've gathered through the information.
I like that. Assessment is gathering information. Evaluation is, okay, what does this information mean to me? What does it mean to them? So it's kind of using the data or the information you get from assessment, you evaluate at that point. That's I think that was very, very good answers for that. All right, I think that was plenty for today. Like I said, we have made it to the point of we've covered everything that's going to be on the midterm test. And like I say, I'm going to give you several days again for this one where you can block out some time for it. You'll recognize some of the questions that we just went over when we reviewed the last test. I know I'm too nice, and the last test was too easy, and this one's going to be pretty easy too. So we're not going to do an actual review this time though. So what I need you guys to do before you sit down to take this test, go back through chapter 5 and 6 and look at this stuff again. Because I'm not going to sit and talk through everything from those 2 chapters, but it should be fresh on your mind. Know about briefing and debriefing, and know about goals and objectives, and know about the 4 steps of, here I am reviewing when I just said I wasn't going to. Know about the 4 steps of the therapeutic recreation process. What are they? Somebody tell me quick.
Assessment, planning, and the evaluation.
Implementation.
Implementation.
Good job. Thank you. Know the API. You can remember that. And then fill in. You need to know that those are the 4 steps, and that is the order that they happen. And you see how this chapter really is a very, very important one in the process of knowing what therapeutic recreation is about. Because if you don't know this API process and follow it, then you can't provide therapeutic recreation. As we go on farther into the semester, we'll talk about some of the special populations that we deal with, like people with disabilities and things, and certain ways that we would provide therapeutic recreation to them using the things that we're learning in chapters 5 and 6. Okay, so add that to what you already had on the first test, and just be watching for, I'll set up to where when I deploy the next test, which could be today, but like I say, I'll leave it open for several days. When I deploy that test, I'll make sure you get a notification on it. Okay, everybody feel okay about that? All right, thank you guys.
Sounds good.
Y'all have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. Y'all be
Have a
careful.
good one.
You too.
All right, see you guys. Thank y'all.